What's going on, hockey friends? We are back, and today we are taking a look at the Minnesota Wild and why I think they have the potential to be competing for Stanley Cups in just a few years' time. We'll be taking a look at their current roster and what makes it so good, and then we'll have a look at their prospect pool to see what players are waiting in the wings and are ready to make an impact on this exciting team. So, let's not waste any more time and let's get into it. So this season so far, the Minnesota Wild have been one of the most impressive teams for me. They're at the time of recording 4th in the Central Division, but they have 3 games in hand and are only 4 points off top of the division. But they've been one of the most impressive teams in the league, plain and simple. They're one of the highest scoring teams in the league, top 3 for goals per game, and they're doing it without 1 or 2 guys running away with the point scoring. The only player who's above point per game on the Wild is Kirill Kaprizov, and trust me, we'll get to him later. But the rest of the team, except for Matt Zuccarello, who is just point per game, is below point per game, but they're still producing at an impressive rate, and a lot of them are close to or above half a point per game. I think that's a key part. They don't have to rely on a guy like Kirill Kaprizov to always put up the points if they want a chance of winning. Instead, everyone puts up points on this team, but if you find yourself having trouble scoring, then having a superstar like Kirill Kaprizov to lean on is huge. And I guess that leads me to one of my many reasons why the Minnesota Wild will be competing for cups in a few years. And it's Kirill Kaprizov. I absolutely love him. I was so excited when I learned he was coming to the NHL ahead of last year, and I was not disappointed. Calder Trophy winner and then signing that big boy contract that will keep him in Minnesota for at least another 5 years. He's the face of the franchise and someone they've needed for years. For me, Minnesota haven't really had any superstar caliber players since like Zach Parise in his first year in Minnesota, and even then he didn't reach the numbers Kaprizov has. The only real comparable is Marian Gaborik, and that was 13-14 years ago. So Minnesota have been starving for a guy like this. But I really like the rest of the team as well. You look at a guy like Ryan Hartman, he's having a career season if he gets to stay healthy. Matt Zuccarello is killing it despite his age. And then you have Kevin Fiala, he's been really good since he came to Minnesota, and he looks like he could have a 3rd straight season scoring 20 goals. He's been massively unlucky this year, he's underperforming his expected goals by like 6, so he should technically have 6 more goals to his name. And then you have one of my favorites, it's Joel Eriksson Ek, who for the past 2 seasons now have been a sneaky Selke trophy player. He's been so good across the board, his numbers are incredible on both ends of the ice, and there's no surprise he was signed to an 8-year deal, which I think is an absolute steal when you look at his cap hit. Minnesota are filled with these analytic darlings, but for good reason, they are actually good. Jonas Brodin, mammoth defensive numbers. Jared Spurgeon, same story with him, and he's just good all over the ice. And like I said, it's the same with Joel Eriksson Ek. This team already has some really good foundations, and they will only build on them and get even better. But I still think there are a few things the Wild need to work on if they really want to solidify themselves as Stanley Cup contenders. The way I see it, Minnesota are 2 or 3 players away from becoming that bona fide cup contender that this team has the potential to reach. And for me, the first thing they need is that number 1 center that every other cup contending team has. Sure, I was just talking about how good Joel Eriksson Ek is, and while he is really good and on pace for a career season, I don't see him having that superstar offensive caliber in him. But of course, he should still be on the team and not be traded. He's part of one of the best shutdown lines in the league, and come playoff time, those are so important, and he is still very capable going forward. I've seen talk about Thomas Hertl at the trade deadline, and yeah, he's good, but then I'd rather have Eriksson Ek, who's 4 years younger, and he's here on a long-term deal. And then you have Claude Giroux, who looks like he could be on the market as well, and I like him. The only problem with him is his age, but he's got all the tools to be the number 1 center for at least this season and maybe next year. But my favorite solution is that you don't trade for anyone at all, and you just wait for Marco Rossi to develop into the number 1 center that he could be. but I'll be talking about him later. I'm also not completely sold on Minnesota's goaltending. The only problem they've had this year is that they're letting in too many goals per game. They're, at the time of recording, 24th for goals against at 5-on-5, while they're second in the league for goals for at 5-on-5. If we look at past cup winners, most of them have been ranging from very solid to very good when it comes to goals against, and none of them have been above 3 goals against per game. But for goaltending, the Wild shouldn't go out on the market or sign or trade for a goalie. They have a perfectly capable one in their prospect pool, and we'll get to him in just a minute. Building a cup team is a long process, and for Minnesota, it's just starting, so I'm not expecting them to go out of their way and pay a premium to get a player they think is that final piece. I think most of the answers to what they're missing is in their prospect pool, and Minnesota will have to build through it because of the cap penalties from the buyouts of Zach Parise and Ryan Suter, who will reach $14 million from 2023 to 2025, and that will cause some problems if they want to sign any big names in free agency. But, like I said, there are answers in the prospect pool, so let's have a look at it. So, the Minnesota prospect pool is very good. It's not the best prospect pool in the league, but it doesn't have to be either. The team is clearly good enough right now to be a top team in the league, and with the top prospects they do have in their system, they will only get better. I'm going to focus on 4 prospects they have in their system, and I think all of them have really good potential to become important players for this team in the near future. And we're going to start off with my favorite, and probably a lot of Wild fans' new favorite prospect. It's of course goaltender Jesper Wallstedt, or as I like to call him, the Wolf of Wallstedt. Yeah, I'm sorry, that was awful, but Jesper Wallstedt is arguably one of the steals of the 2021 draft, and even though the World Juniors were cancelled and he only got to play 2 games, he was still very impressive. An incredible 48 shot shutout against Slovakia, and an impressive performance against Russia. Even though technically he let in 3 goals, they were all really lucky goals, and he was just so solid, composed, and he was just so calm in net, as he always is. In the SHL this year, he's been superb. The numbers are great, and there's really nothing else to say. He's one of the best, if not the best goaltender prospect in the world, being compared to Yaroslav Askarov and Spencer Knight, and you could probably argue he's better than Askarov. I'm not gonna get into that debate, but you can make a really strong case for it. As for his potential of making the NHL, well, yeah, he's obviously making the NHL in a year or 2, and for me, he's got the potential to be a starter for the Wild for years to come, and be an amazing starter at that. If we look at the 2020 draft, we know that the Wild selected forward Marco Rossi at 9th overall, a very good pick at the time, and it still is, despite the issues Rossi has had since the draft. To summarize, he got the virus and had long-term complications because of it. He couldn't play for over 5 months, but now he's back in action and he's having a great comeback year in the AHL. And also this week, he made his NHL debut. He's still got bags of potential despite being set back a whole season, and with the skill he possesses, the stick handling, the playmaking, he's got so many tools, and he's still going to be at least a top 6 forward in the NHL, and I just hope he doesn't suffer any more complications with this virus. Like I said earlier, he's got that potential to become that number 1 center, and it would save Minnesota a lot of headaches if he can reach that. But we also need some defensive prospects, and I've picked Kalen Addison, who came to Minnesota in the Jason Zucker trade with Pittsburgh almost 2 years ago. Addison is an interesting offensive defenseman that doesn't necessarily project to be a top 4 big minute-munching defenseman, but he's got the offensive tools, like his passing and his puck-moving ability, and he could definitely become a power play quarterback for the Wild. He won't be their Norris Trophy nominee anytime soon, but he doesn't have to be either. When you already have guys like Jonas Brodin and Jared Spurgeon, you can afford these luxuries. And the last prospect I want to shine an extra light on is the 12th pick from the 2019 draft. It's forward Matt Boldy. He's a nifty little player. Well, he's a big guy, but he's nifty and he's got some really nice tools which will make him excel at the NHL level. He's got a good shot, he's got good playmaking ability, he's got great hands, and I really like what I've seen from him. All those tools, with his size, he kinda comes in the mold of a power forward, but I feel like people associate power forwards with being slow and sluggish, but Boldy isn't that at all. In fact, he's quite a good skater and he does have that top 6 potential, and this week he got to make his NHL debut alongside Marco Rossi and he scored right away. We love to see it. This is a star in the making. So those are my prospects that I'm a bit extra excited about for the Wild. But of course, there are some other good ones as well, such as Adam Beckman, Carson Lambos, and Alexander Kovanov, to just name a few. So with all that said, there are so many things about this Wild team and the organization that I'm optimistic about. They have their core players tied up to long-term deals. They recently tied up their head coach to a long-term deal, and I just feel like from the outside looking in, there's so much positivity around this team. I've never paid too much attention to the Wild, but these past seasons have really caught my eye, and it caught the eyes of the hockey world in general. I think having a superstar like Kirill Kaprizov is a huge part of that. He's someone who alone is worth the price of admission, and you have so many other young exciting pieces on this team, and if they just pan out and you keep the roster together, I can definitely see this team competing for cups in these coming years. I know it's easy to say, but I'm really optimistic about them. And part of my optimism is also based in the fact that I think the Wild have the best home jerseys in the league, and just that reason alone is enough for me to think the Wild are cup contenders. Well guys, that's it for today. Do you also think Minnesota are on the cusp of becoming cup contenders? And if not, what's missing? Talk to me in the comments below, and I will see you in the next one.